If you've been watching my videos for a bit, then you'll know that a short while ago, I released a video about Kamen Rider Super Climax Heroes, an 18-developed 3D fighting game released for the Wii. Despite this game being completely broken, I and many others still love playing it, and I was under the impression that 18's fighting game output on the Wii pretty much ended here. But then I remembered another game they put out. One filled with vampires, holy water, zombies, and lots of whipping, and like Kamen Rider, this game is also based on a very popular IP. Released in late 2008 in North America and early 2009 elsewhere, 18 and Konami's joint effort fighting game hasn't been remembered too fondly over the years, and in terms of popularity, it's completely fallen off the face of the earth.
Except on YouTube where people pretty much talk about it every day.
Castlevania Judgment is the first fighting game in the series, and it should have been a home run. Take an experienced fighting game developer, give them a beloved IP that already has lots of combat in it, and you should be good to go. But it didn't go as smoothly as this, unfortunately. I've heard mixed opinions about this game over the years, but it can't be that bad, right? Okay, let's see here. Castlevania Judgment Metacritic. Okay, let me click on this. A 49? And a 5.8 user score? What? How? I've never seen a fighting game developed by a respected studio get reviews this poor before. I mean, 18 has some less than desirable games in their catalogue, but this was made by early 2000s 18, the studio that gave us Bloody Roar and Tatsunoko vs Capcom, which is a certified hood classic. Okay, I need to calm down and reassess the situation. I'll be honest, I'd never played Castlevania Judgment before prior to recording this video, but I thought that the negative things I read online about the game were coming from armchair elitists who have never played a fighting game, not from legitimate review outlets. Now, let me make this perfectly clear. I did not allow the negative reviews to falsely influence my stance on the game. Every claim you hear me make in this video is 100% my opinion unless specifically stated otherwise, and they're based on my own personal experiences with Judgment. Consider this video a journal of sorts, and as I experience the game for the very first time, I'll be documenting my thoughts and feelings. My goal with this video is to see if I enjoy this game enough as a new player to justify recommending it to others, while also trying to figure out how this game was made by researching its development. There is a lot to cover when it comes to Castlevania Judgment, so join me on my journey as I go from a complete noob to a true Castlevania gamer. Admittedly, info about Judgment's development is a bit hard to come across, but I've done my best to compile all the information I could find online about said topic. Let's take it way back to a time that's been long forgotten by man, one that's doomed to rot in the pits of obscurity for the rest of time. The early 2000s. Video game legend and Castlevania extraordinaire Koji Igarashi had a desire to make a brand new game in the series for the Wii, and his plan was for the game to heavily incorporate the motion controls that the system is known for. Since the characters in the Castlevania series often use whips to fight their way through countless creatures of the night, Igarashi wanted to replicate the whip swinging motion with the Wiimote, forcing players to physically swing their arm to attack, like how the Wii version of The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess also uses motion controls for Link's sword swings. Fans have been asking me for a while to do a Wii game using the Wiimote as a whip, but Castlevania is the type of game that fans play for hours at a time, and to swing the Wii remote for hours at a time is a very torturous endeavor. So I thought about it a little bit more, and thought that if it was a timed sort of game that you play for a limited time, that would be a nice fit. It's unknown how development progressed after this point, and who knows, maybe Judgment started off as a regular Castlevania game, but one thing led to another, and it ended up taking the form of a fighting game. First announced to the public on July 1st, 2008 in an article by IGN titled "Konami Announces Castlevania Judgment for Wii," it was said by Konami's Vice President of Marketing Anthony Krautz, "We wanted to take this addition to the signature Konami franchise in a direction that really sets it apart from the previous Castlevania titles in the series. The Wii Remote and Nunchuck capabilities, along with the iconic characters, make this game the ideal entry point into the fighting game genre. This combination is certain to thrill old and new fans of the franchise." In this same article, IGN reported that Death Note and Bakuman creator Takeshi Obata was involved with the project in the form of the lead artist, so that means fan favorite character Simon Belmont, for example, went from looking like this to this. As for how the gameplay itself was developed, Igarashi stated this: "It's a fighter, but it's being developed as a 3D action game. It's an extension of an action game. I have dedicated myself to create a super exciting action game based around the simple controls of the Wii, and I feel it's coming along very nicely. The Wii is selling, but the games aren't selling. That's what I'm concerned about. I think there are two roads you can take. Create a game for the core fans with as low a development cost as possible. The other is to just find a different market for these consoles outside of the core gamer. It's possible that Konami didn't provide Igarashi with a large budget to make his game, and it could explain why the game is a 3D fighting game as opposed to a more traditional Castlevania adventure. During E3 2008, a few months before the game was set to launch, OneUp.com's Jeremy Parish stated, "The saddest thing is watching Koji Igarashi on the E3 show floor, hovering around the Castlevania Judgment kiosk for half an hour, knowing that everyone hates it, knowing that he knows they hate it, then realizing that it's not the game that he really wanted to make anyway, because his publisher won't give him 2 dimes to rub together to develop the really awesome games he does want to create." Ouch, that's really harsh. Castlevania Judgment's character roster is composed of 14 characters, with 13 of them being series mainstays and 1 being a brand new character. Aeon, the new character, wants to defeat Judgment's villain, the Time Reaper, to prevent the series' timeline from being erased. How does he go about doing this? Well, I'm glad you asked. Aeon decides to cause a time rift, don't ask me how, and combine multiple eras of Castlevania together in order to find a warrior strong enough to defeat the Time Reaper and restore order to the world. The other characters in the game, and I'm probably going to pronounce their names wrong, so forgive me, but they're Alucard, Carmilla, Cornell, Death, Dracula, Eric Lacard, Gollum, Grant Dynasty, Maria Renard, Sylpha Belnades, Shanoa, Simon Belmont, and Trevor Belmont. As mentioned before, Takeshi Obata was the lead artist on the game, and he redesigned every character from the ground up. The reception to his redesigns weren't the most positive due to fans thinking that they didn't fit the Castlevania IP, and for them being too similar to his artwork in Death Note. They had a point, because the art style that Obata uses reminds me heavily of Death Note, and I'm not even a diehard fan of the series. Some character designs look awesome, some look a little weird with some questionable fashion choices, and some are Carmilla, which is one of the most obvious depictions of horny bait I've ever seen in a fighting game, and honestly, I've got to give some respect to Obata for incorporating the writer's barely disguised fetish meme into the art department. Another gripe that Castlevania fans had with the redesigns in the game is that the characters don't really look like they belong in the time periods that they come from. In the 2022 Destructoid article, Castlevania Judgment requires you to establish a safe word, writer Zoe Hanley states the following hilarious quote. For Castlevania Judgment, Takeshi Obata was brought in, famous for the manga Death Note. His vision for the characters was lots of bondage gear. Screw whatever era they were supposedly from. They wear leather with lots of zippers. Take a look at Maria Renard, for example, who is closer to her appearance in Castlevania Rondo of Blood if she and Richter invaded Dracula's BDSM club. She's dressed like a leather goth Lolita, and her personality is weirdly vacuous. I mean, there's childlike naivety, and then there's tripping during a special attack. She also has an obsession with tits, expressing jealousy for how all the other female characters have heaping boobage. I get that this is a sort of trope in anime for flat-chested girls, but I mean, Maria should probably just wait until puberty before she starts complaining. Yeah, it's safe to say that people really did not like Judgment's characterization of its characters and its art style. But enough about Obata's drawn character renders. How do they actually look when they're in the game? They look fine, I guess? As the Wii lacked high-definition output, Judgment's graphics haven't aged super well, and while there are plenty of nice-looking games on the system, I don't think this is one of them. Characters don't have a lot of detail in their faces and their mannerisms, and it means their expressions are quite dull and simplistic. Also, while I don't think their outfits look bad, except maybe for Grant, what the hell happened here, I don't think they're amazing either. Look, I don't know. I personally don't think that Judgment is a bad-looking game, but it lacks a unique art style. I think that making the game cel-shaded or something could have gone a long way in hiding some of its blemishes, but what we got in the final product doesn't look very memorable. Let's dive into the meat and potatoes of Judgment, meaning the gameplay. You use your nunchuck to move the character around, with the C button being your jump button and the Z button being your block button. You can't move around when you're blocking, so it is committal in nature. In order to attack your opponent, you need to shake the Wii remote. Remember before how Igarashi didn't like the idea of motion-based attacks because he worried that it would tire players out and be annoying? I guess Konami loved the idea of that, because as far as I can tell, they went against his wishes and implemented it into the game anyway. You shake the remote once for a single hit, and you can shake it continuously for a combo. You can also attack while on the ground or in the air, and look, either way your arm will die. If you hold the B button down and then shake the remote, you can perform a finisher, which is a high damage move. Shaking the remote while continuing to hold the button down leads to a finisher combo. But that's not to be confused with a charge attack, which also requires you to shake the Wii remote while holding the B button. When your meter is full, you can press down on the D-pad to perform your super, and these can go on for a while. Meter isn't used for anything else in the game as far as I can tell, so you'll always be saving it to use your super. If you hold Z and shake the Wii remote, you can perform an unblockable attack, and if you're hit by this, you lose your meter and will be unable to take action for a brief period. But wait, that's not all, because Castlevania Judgment also has sub-weapons. You know how in the early Castlevania games you can find little weapons like the holy water to use at the cost of hearts? Judgment has the exact same system. They require hearts, like I just said, and if you press the A button, you'll throw out your sub-weapon, but if you hold A and then let go, you'll use more hearts, but your sub-weapon will be more effective. There are also interactable things in the environment for you to use, like throwing a barrel at someone, for example. I know that was a lot, but Judgment attempts to fit in a lot of systems into the somewhat weird control scheme it offers. It must be said, however, that you can also play the game with a classic controller, and while this does help a lot in alleviating the motion control induced pain that shaking the Wii remote offers, it doesn't magically make the game super fun in my opinion. It's still the same game regardless of which controller you use, and things like the graphics, character designs, and camera are still the same. Speaking of the camera, yeah, I hate it. It jumps all over the place and has a hard time keeping both players on an even playing field, meaning that it looks like you're watching a street fight being recorded by your drunk friend who's on his 7th kebab that night. Seriously, what is going on here? To be very honest with you, yeah, I see why people didn't like this game on release. It feels like a cheap knockoff of Capcom's Power Stone series, and despite a friend of mine telling me to not trash the game, I'm really struggling to find things I like about it. I hate putting negativity into my videos, so I will say that one thing I like about the game is that it has a varied character roster. Characters from all sorts of Castlevania games show up here, and a fighting game that lets me play as Death and Dracula will always garner some respect from me. Okay, going back to the major elephant in the room, it's no surprise that Judgment was completely shit on upon its release, and even before it. In his article for Kotaku titled "I Wish I Hadn't Played Castlevania Judgment," writer Luke Plunkett stated, "Of all the days I had to play games at TGS, and of all games I had the chance to play, why the hell did I leave it until Sunday afternoon to play Castlevania Judgment? I mean, my last memory of TGS could have been of something good, like Macross Ace Frontier, or in Konami's case, another kick at Pro Evo 2009. Instead, I walked away from the show feeling bad. Bad for Castlevania fans at least. There is just nothing right about this game, nothing. As a Castlevania game, well, as a fighter, it's not a Castlevania game at all, and as a fighter, it's one of the worst I've ever seen. It's as though Konami looked at 3D fighters, saw what worked, what didn't work, and just for shits and giggles, threw in everything that didn't work. Normally when I talk about a game's review scores, I like to read out some small quotes from outlets and explain why they rated the game the way they did, but I'm feeling extra today, so let's do some rapid-fire reporting, shall we? Eurogamer, 3 out of 10. Game Informer, 5 out of 10. GameSpot, 3 out of 10. G4, 2 out of 10. OneUp.com, 16%. That's a 1.6 out of 10. IGN, 7.5 out of 10. And they even nominated it for Best Fighting Game of 2008. Aside from IGN and some of the Nintendo-affiliated review scores, I wonder why they liked it, I couldn't really find any other reviewers that said anything good about the game. Overall, I've concluded that Judgment, for many reasons, is a deeply flawed game. From its mediocre art style, horrible camera, polarizing character redesigns, and simple and repetitive gameplay, there wasn't much for me personally to like about the game. With that being said though, looking back on it, yeah, I'm glad I gave Judgment a shot. It's certainly not for me, but it most likely has a fanbase around the world, and who knows, maybe some people who did buy it back when it came out had a good time with it, and good for them. Konami never attempted to make another Castlevania fighting game after Judgment, and they never ported the game to any other system, so to this very day, it's a true Wii exclusive. On the 22nd of January 2009, GoNintendo.com reported that the game had only sold 3,700 units in its first week, meaning that it was a massive sales bomb in the country. 2 years after Judgment's release in 2008, however, Castlevania Lords of Shadow was released. In retrospect, I see this game as the one that Igarashi wanted to make all along, the 3D action game that doesn't tire you as you play. Lords of Shadow received positive reviews and was seen as a return to form of sorts for the series, so at least fans didn't have to suffer for years and years after not getting a new game after a disappointing new entry came and went. Admittedly, and I know that this is hard to believe with modern day Konami existing and all, but things were on the up and up for a bit after Judgment came out. Castlevania Order of Ecclesia was also released in 2008 to positive reviews, the aforementioned Lords of Shadow performed very well upon its release in 2010, and it even got a sequel which came out in 2014. Surely this brand new high-octane sequel must have ushered in a very bright and positive new era for the series, right? Oh my goodness.